Now we're going to focus on the guidelines for using verbal messages effectively, and there's 6 of these. The first is extensionalize, and that means to avoid intentional orientation. Intentional orientation is a tendency to view people, objects, and events how they're talked about or labeled rather than how they actually exist. So we can talk about how you're going to respond to an instructor, because all instructors basically are labeled as unsympathetic, self-centered, egotistical. And if that's how you view all instructors, the problem is you're not treating each individual instructor the way that they are. Another example that your textbook uses is if you're afraid of dogs, and so you say to somebody, I'm afraid of dogs. Somebody may say to you, all dogs? And what they're asking you is, are you responding to the label of a dog without considering that there are teacup chihuahuas that would fit in the palm of your hand, and that dog you are too scared of? Probably not. What you mean to say is that you're afraid of large dogs, or you're afraid of St. Bernards, or you're afraid of pit bulls or Rottweilers. So don't fall into the trap that all things are the same. First, look at the individual thing, the individual event, the individual object, and then make some characterizations about that, but know that not all things are the same. The next tip for using verbal messages effectively is to see the individual, and that means we don't know everything out there. It's impossible that we know everything about a person. It's impossible that we know everything about a situation. It's impossible that we know everything about somebody's background or upbringing. So what we need to know is that we are ignorant, and that's going to be our greatest step to further knowledge. So remind yourself that you don't know everything. Even if somebody's told you so much about themselves, you're confident they have told you everything, there are certain things you just simply will not know, and you need to be aware of that. Distinguishing facts between facts and inferences is the third tip, and that just means don't take somebody's opinion or inference to be factual. You need to make sure that you can understand the difference between things that are observed and then spoken about. So if we observe something like that woman is wearing a blue jacket, that's a fact. We can't possibly disagree with that. You could say, well, no, it's more teal or something like that, but it's a shade of blue, and we could probably agree about that. However, if somebody said, oh, that jacket's very expensive, well, unless that person knows that woman in the blue jacket, they have no way of knowing that. But sometimes you'll hear people say things that they really don't have any knowledge of, but it sounds like a fact. So be careful that not only that you can differentiate between fact statements and opinion statements, but that when you're speaking, you make it clear that some things are your opinions and some things are factual. Factual statements can only be made after observation. They're only limited to what has been observed. So if you didn't observe it, you cannot make a factual statement about it. Only the observer can make factual statements. It may be only about the past or the present, not the future, because anything that happens in the future is not factual. It has to approach certainty, which means it can't be argued with. And also, whatever statement you make, if it's factual, it can be verified. There's a way for somebody else to say, yes, that is in fact happening. The next tip is to discriminate among, and that means that you don't stereotype people. You don't want to say that, again, all politicians are slimy, all Middle Eastern men are sexist, all Muslims are terrorists, because some Muslims are very peace-minded, and I know that some of you even talked about interacting with them on a plane that you took during a travel excursion, and your initial reaction was, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to sit next to a terrorist, but once you sat next to them, you actually talked to them, and you found out this is not a Muslim extremist, this is just somebody who follows the Muslim faith. Next is talk about the middle, avoid polarization. So statements like you're either for us or against us, those are classic statements that show polarization. Some people say either you go to a four-year college or you might as well not even bother going to a community college because it's not real college. Well, that's silly. It depends on which community college you're going to. I'm sure there's some that they don't have classrooms and they don't have textbooks and none of their professors have masters or PhDs. Well, that would be a college that may not be worth your time. But it's perfectly acceptable to go to a community college first and then a four-year school because it is still higher learning. And the last thing we want to do is not use static evaluation. So we need to update our messages. So however somebody was 10 years ago, if you're going to use static evaluation, you'll talk about Mary, who you knew in high school, as the same person in 2010 as she was in the year 2000 when you graduated from high school. And so what you would do is you'd go back to your 10-year high school reunion and go, oh, there's Mary. She's so self-centered and rude. She thinks she's the greatest person ever. Well, that's a static evaluation. And if you went to talk to Mary, you would probably hear that she has completely changed her ways, and now she actually volunteers at orphanages down in Africa every summer. She's not at all self-absorbed and arrogant anymore. So don't evaluate people based on what you thought they were several years ago, but also don't evaluate people on who they were 6 months ago either, because we're all changing and evolving, and I think it's important to recognize when somebody has made positive changes in their lives. So pretty straightforward and simplistic. The chapter has so much more depth and insight than what I gave you here, but this is just a brief overview. So again, the principles were the first half, and the last half were the guidelines for using verbal messages effectively. I hope that was helpful to you.